Hello VRay users, Alex here, VRay Guide, and tonight we're going to animate a sailing boat with foam and splashes by using Phoenix. And of course I'm gonna use this amazing Ad Astra boat that is free for download. If you go to 3dsky.org you will be able to find it here in the free section. There's actually another one which is more detailed, but if you want to follow this tutorial exactly, so just download this boat and merge it to your scene. If you don't know, the Ad Astra boat is an award-winning yacht, super yacht of 2013. It's a pretty awesome boat, very futuristic. You can go ahead check out the videos of that amazing boat. So in those samples the boat is sailing pretty fast, and we're gonna do sample that is kind of coming to that speed but not really going full speed, because the simulation takes a lot of memory, a lot of space, a lot of RAM. So we're gonna do something a little bit shorter, within 200 frames. Okay, so let's go back to our model. Open up your 3ds Max file, actually download this sample. I'm gonna share two of them, start and end. So download the start in order to have the same unit scale, because I was following house group tutorial, and in unit setup they said to use metric. However, when I've got to check the sample, it got 20 centimeters as 1 meter unit setup point, and that actually gave me a really nice waves and splashes. So just download this file because this is going to be your preset. Okay, now as you can see here, I've got my boat and I've got also a couple of lights set up. So I have one light for let's get one of those angles here. So one light is a sunlight. You can see here shining through the back. We're kind of getting this nice sunset area here. It's pretty low sun. And I also have got some ambient light right here, and I also gonna put here the omni light, so it will give a little bit more contrast with a very low 0.1 and bluish color, so we will balance a little bit. The ambient occlusion, direct GI, that's to give a little bit more GI, since in this sequence we're not gonna use GI, so I'm going to disconnect that. Of course I need to add my denoiser, just add the denoiser with AI in order to start doing test renders. So actually going to delete all of those passes. Let me leave them, maybe we need to check them, but I'm not gonna render those passes. I'm just gonna save PNG with 16-bit and render it as it is with 1920 full HD 1 and 4 on my image sampler. So not crazy high quality, but the grain will be cleaned with denoiser, so make sure to activate it. So this is what we've got here. Let me show you. We have one camera here for the nose, and you can see the render goes pretty fast without the GI. Alright, now let's start doing our simulation, and I'm gonna go and hide the lights and the cameras, and now let's go and drag and drop the simulation box right here, and I'm going to adjust it a little bit here in the grid. So I'm gonna lift it up something like this, and let's reduce the height. So somewhere here, this is how the whole thing gonna happen. The waves gonna cut it somewhere here in between, even a little bit lower. So this, if this is the whole 100%, here is gonna be 50, so we need to go somewhere around here to 40. I'm gonna put here 800, I'm gonna put here 2000, and I'm going to do this 62. So basically, yeah, almost 100 million total cells. All right, so that's good enough to give our boat enough room. Now let's scroll down, leave it as a default here. We come to dynamics. In the dynamics, what we're gonna do, we're gonna activate the initial fill up and put here, let's put 42. So if this is 100, here 50 in the middle, so 40, 42 will be somewhere here. And the rest is going by the default. Now let's go and activate our foam and click yes. So the icon will be enabled here for the foam. And let's adjust a little bit the foam parameters. So before we get to the foam, let's fix our foam in the simulator. So in the simulator, we're gonna do foam on berth amount 0, and then threshold is going to be 1. Then half-life is going to be also 1, and maximum age 20. So basically we're not gonna generate any foam. We're gonna generate foam from the collision of splashes and mist, so we're gonna do it here. Life of my waves, I actually want to dye them pretty fast. I don't want them to continue to roll, and new going to be born also pretty fast. So let's do the size a little smaller, 0.5, variation large 5, and distribution let's do 300. Now in the dynamics, B2B interaction, no need. Rising speed is how fast the foam is rising above and below the waves. So falling 5 and rising speed also 5. So 5 above, 5 below in the meters. And sticky foam, we don't need 0. And surface lock, also don't need that. Now in patterns, we have different patterns, so let's do the strength 1, so we'll have more patterns in our splashes and our foam. And radius, let's do 1.2, staying a little bit longer time on the wave. Now let's do the splash mist. And here we go, we got our splash and mist modifier right here. So before we adjust those, let's go back to our simulation here, foam. Let's do splash and mist. So splash and mist, we're gonna do splash amount 20, one more splashes. Threshold, we're gonna do 10. Fly 0, splash amount and mist, we don't need that, so 0, mist amount 3. Foam on hit, so this is where we're gonna produce the foam. We're gonna do 2 here, amount, minimum, age, let's leave it at 0. Depth is how deep this is gonna go in the water, so 4. We're gonna have deep berth of the foam under the water, so we get realistic engine work. Properties, let's do splash air drag 5, mist air drag, let's do it 3, maximum outside age 4. So how long are those gonna be? And initial, let's leave it by default, all of that stuff. Liquid like, let's do this 1. We want this 100 to be liquid. If it's 0, it's not gonna act like liquid. And after liquid, let's leave it by 1. Okay, now scrolling down to output, here we don't need to do anything. This is all good, leave it just by default. In the input we need to here, I think it's all good. In the input we can adjust a little bit manually here, the auto range, so we will see it a little bit better. So let's do it 1.1 and 0.01. Here is the 111. Let's do here 0.001, and those, yeah, let's leave this as a default. And the range here is probably 1000. RGB 1 1000. Now let's not show that, and that's how we're gonna preview it. It's kind of gonna help us a little bit better to see all the splashes and everything. In the rendering though, we need to do small adjustments for the ocean here. I forgot this. We need to switch that to the ocean mesh, and it says strongly recommended to use static default geometry in infinite ocean. Would you like to enable it? Let's do yes, and let's go and do some modifications to the ocean. So the level is going to be 41.5, a little bit below the original one, so we're gonna get a little bit more splashes and waves. Ocean subdivs 0 to save a little bit more RAM. We don't need that to subdivide ocean. We're already gonna get a good quality with it. So underwater googles right here, and let's do displacement for the ocean. And in our displacement, let's do the next thing. Here we need to add map, so let's go and add Phoenix ocean tags. So I'm gonna add ocean tags. Now we need to adjust a little bit the ocean tags. I'm gonna drag and drop it here. Let's go into this ocean tags and change a little bit the parameters. So we put in the ocean tags one level of detail, and actually 10, and then 1 0. Let's do this sharpness 1. We want a really sharp waves, and no velocity, no wave crest, and linear 1. And here let's do 60. And let's reduce that, the seed somewhere here, right? So now let's continue. Let's now set up the foam shaders and the mist shaders. So here it's pretty basic. The only thing that we need to do is to set the size multiplier to 4. Disable liquid shadows and force off 1, and this is going to be approximate, and the light cache, we don't need that. Gonna have a little bit better quality. Now in the bubbles we're gonna switch to points, and those points we're going to adjust here 0.017 11.02. so this is how it's gonna stay here. Now let's do the same thing to this guy also. So splashes turning to be points, and size 4, and the rest is disable liquid shadows. And here we're gonna got the force on, because this is where we're gonna generate the splashes here. And approximate liquid light cache, also we don't need, but I use 0. And here the same thing, we're gonna bump it up to 17, the point, the alpha point. So basically it shows how fast the splashes are going to stay and how long they're gonna disappear. So alpha point and radius point is the spread around and the continuity of those splashes. All right, now we set up this correctly. Now let's animate our boat. So with the boat, I'm going to, you can see, I'm going to twist it a little bit up. So 0.5, something like this. So it will cut the waves. And now I'm going to animate that. So you see 200 frames. If you have 100, you can set up here to 200, expand it. I'm gonna play around with it, and I encourage you guys to do it also. You know, slower animation, 300 frames, probably gonna look better, but for our sake of idea, let's stay with 200. So I'm gonna activate my animation key, and from this point I have to move it to 200, and now move my boat and deactivate it. So basically this is what I'm getting here. Now with my animation, I don't want the boat just to go to start slowly and then slowly go to decay. So here I'm gonna continue the boat with straight line, and here I'm actually gonna make a little bit anticipation. So what anticipation means, you know, before you jump you kind of go down and then up, right? So with the boat it also is going to go back a little bit and then forward. All right, so normally this is what happens with the boats when they start to sail. So they go a little bit back and then shoo, they go forward. Okay, now let's actually connect that simulation to our boat, because we want our boat to go together with this. So I'm going to use the connection and link the simulation to the boat, so we can see now the boat is moving with the simulator together. And for the engines we need to do some work here on that lower part, so the water will come out. So I'm gonna go and add the liquid here, and this liquid is going to be attached to the box. So I'm gonna put here box, and make it taller, a little bit wider. So that box is going to simulate our engines. Alright, now that box is going to be added here to this guy. Add the box, and let's put a little bit stronger here, the exit of the water. And we're not gonna have any texture map for the mask, so just leave the rest as a default. Okay, now we need to connect that to the boat, so let's also link that with the linking tool. Alright, so now every time the boat is gonna go, it's gonna go with that connector and the simulation together. Now let's run the simulation and see what we get. Let me get a little bit different angle and select the simulation, click start. So again, we're simulating at 100 million total cells, so it's gonna take some time. Just have a little patience. Alright, so the first frame was done here in a minute, so it shows us that the whole thing is gonna take 5 hours to calculate. And if we click render here, we can see that the ocean's been created, and that's what I wanted to see, that we are really at the same level here. Now let's add some water material. Water material is pretty basic here. I'm gonna close this render and select my simulation and apply the water. As you can see, I'm kind of giving it a little bit greenish look, and on the fog color also a little greenish, 0.01, and I also need to do a cutoff at 0.01, so we'll get nice good looking water here. Okay, so let's just apply this to our water and do another render. So no worries about the settings. I'm gonna post complete blueprint of all the settings that I was showing here. You can print it out if you want, and it will be much easier to follow with all the settings for the water. So I'm getting this message that we're using displacement, and it will use additional memory, so just click OK and then show this message again. It comes out every frame, so if you click don't show this message again, you can render the sequence. Alright, now let's do this, and voila, we're having very beautiful looking ocean, and we can see the greenish water is working really nice here. The reflections working really cool, and the stuff is looking pretty good. Alright, so at that stage I'm pretty much satisfied with water level, how everything looks, and I'm just gonna let this simulation go through, and it's probably gonna take 5 hours, 7 hours, so it's going up and down according to how many frames been added, but it takes a lot of RAM. So I could have put here also 2 of those to simulate engine and the water sprites, but I did some tests and I was losing. It was like basically tripling the whole thing. So this simulation, just so you know, can take up to 100 gigs. That's in my case 200 frames was close to 90 gigabytes, and time consuming, if I would use another 2 boxes to simulate the water splashes, it's basically will be around 200 gigabytes. So if you don't have a lot of space in your computer, just make sure to have short simulations, nothing long like 400 500 frames. Okay, so I'm gonna let it finish and we come back when the whole thing is done. Alright, and the simulation was done. As you can see here, I got really nice launch off, a lot of stuff coming out here, and the boat is sailing. We get a lot of foam and splashes. Let's see how the other camera is looking. Yeah, stuff is looking pretty good. getting nice break of a wave here. So it's a good time to do some test renders and make sure our camera is working fine. And here we have our top camera, which I'm actually going to render out because I think this is a really cool angle, aerial drone view looking shot. I think this can be really like establishing shot, you know, money shot, something that will give the atmosphere and introduce the whole thing, the whole environment, you know. Very impressive, you know, to open or to close your videos with one of those really cool looking shots. Okay, so before I'm gonna render this shot, what I like to do is to export animatic. So create preview animation, and let's click create. Alright, and the animatic is done. So the boat is looking pretty good. I think the camera may be a little bit too fast. I also like to put it on a loop, on repeat, so I can see that animation a couple of times running, just making sure everything's looking good. No, I think the camera is okay. It's for that sake of idea, it can work. I normally would probably do it a little bit slower and not that fast move. Alright, now I also like to render the last frame of this sequence, the first and the last two frames. Animation top, save it here. And before we do the sequence, let's render just one image to see how the whole thing looks. So first, last, and maybe one image in the middle, just to make sure you're going in the right direction. Alright, and this first, actually last frame is done. You can see that the foam and waves looking phenomenal at 1080p, full HD. This stuff looks really great, really good detail. The only problem is the material of the boats can be a little bit better looking. So let's check out what we've got here in our boat. Okay, so that's our boat. Let's do something like this. One of those shots where we can get as much as possible of the foam and the boat sailing in the background. I also want to get a little bit on the front of the nose to see how that's coming out. Now let's go and sample our boat texture. So in this nano bling, we have a bunch of textures that didn't came with the model, so just model came in with no textures. But I'm actually gonna use a new shader. Let's do the car shader, car paint. So let's do this kind of a little yellowish and the flakes somewhere here. So if we look at the boat, that's kind of metallic looking, I guess, here. So that's what we're gonna try to do by increasing the reflection and the glossiness and giving it a little bit grayish look here. Same stuff here. Let's do another car paint. This one, let's make it, let's see if this is a lighter or a darker one. So let's do something like this, and here gray specks. So that's going to be our material. And then the mask, let's do fall off. Oops, without this map. Okay. And here as well, let's increase it to give it a little bit more metallic look. Now let's render, see how that stuff looking. Alright, and the render is done. This stuff is looking pretty phenomenal. I don't know about you guys, but I love the quality, and I love the little green thing in the wave going on, and the metallic color of a car looks really amazing. Now if we go to RGB, probably gonna see some grain going on here. I don't know, some guys might like it actually, but if we switch back to effect result, which is a denoiser, we can see the whole thing is just gone here. Whatever was grainy is just getting really cleaned up and becomes very nice and pleasing to watch. Alright, so I'm pretty much satisfied with how the whole thing looks. I'm gonna take this top view camera that we just did animatic for, and I'm going to render that sequence. So let's do this active segment, and let's see how long it's gonna take. Alright, and the render was done. Let's go check out what we've got here. And the boat is looking great, and the waves, look at that animation. Wow, this just, I can't get enough of just watching it, playing around with it. This stuff just amazing. Maybe the camera needs to be a little bit just slightly slower. I would probably get around 300 frames, but regardless, this stuff looks amazing. So this camera is done. Let's do another one. I'm gonna click C, choose my camera 1. I think this one will be the most beautiful from all of those. And as you can see here, the camera moves together with the boat, and then towards the end it kind of slows down and lets the boat continue a little bit without the camera. So I think this is going to be our money shot. Okay, now I'm gonna select the sequence. Let's call it animation money, and click render, and the render was done. It took about 10 hours, actually 12 hours, because around 8 minutes per frame, which is still good because we're really having a close-up on the boat, and the car material, the car shader is taking a little bit longer than this. But let's see how this sequence came out. I'm gonna open my Nuke, and I'm gonna run this through my non-commercial Nuke version. Alright, and here is our sequence. As you can see, it's looking pretty good. And here are my nodes. So let's go and disconnect those nodes. I'm gonna click D to shut them off, so you guys can see what I did. Basically, this thing can be added in any software such as Premiere, Photoshop. You can use Photoshop to export sequence basically. So I use Nuke, and what I did is I add glow. As you can see here, glow, adding quite a lot. Then I added sharpen to get the detail. I did some hue correction to remove the kind of purplish haze that got from the VRay sun and sky, and I did some color correction. You can see everything popping out. It's pretty good. Color correction tool here, you got the master, shadows, midtones, and highlights, so it does pretty good job on correcting those. And I also added some vigneting to kind of balance the whole thing, and this is what we've got. All right, now I'm gonna export this and write it and run it through Premiere. So that's what I did. And voila, our boat is sailing. Pretty good stuff. So let me show you that sequence that came out from our program. So the stuff is looking pretty good. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Download the samples below, ask questions if you have any, and I'll be more than glad to assist you. Thanks for watching. This is Alex, your VRay guy. Ciao.